What's going on, everybody? I'm Keith, host of Just Our Thoughts with the Fellas, where 4 to 5 of my brothers give their perspective on national as well as local news. We touch on some trending hot topics as well as culturally relevant news. We also get a chance to dive into some deep core conversations. Check us out live every other Monday at 7 p.m. You can find us on Just Our Thoughts on YouTube live, as well as Just Our Thoughts fan page on Facebook. Also, please don't forget to follow us on IG, JOT with the Fellas.
What's up? What's up? What's up? This is your boy Keith, host of Just Our Thoughts. Today we have a special, amazing guest. I'm excited. This brother is excited to share his information, share his experience. Leshaun Jenkins, what's going on, my good brother?
Hey man, how you doing, man? I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited.
Man, I am so appreciative of you accepting that invite, man. I'm excited, man, to learn, of what it is when it comes to school to prison pipeline. So I do want to share, your bio with those that are listening. LaShawn Jenkins is a 2000 graduate from East Carolina University. He earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in history as well as a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science with a double minor in African political systems and French. He completed his master's degree in School of Administration from NC State University. In 2020, he was selected into the Haiti Teacher Fellows Program through UNC Chapel Hill and Duke University. He completed this fellowship program in June of 2021. He also received a certification in global education from Harvard University. He is currently in his 23rd year in educational field, all of which have been spent in Edgecombe County. He currently serves as the principal at W.A. Patillo Middle School. He is a former four-time Teacher of the Year and 18-time Coach of the Year, including State and National Coach of the Year in 2014. He is also a member of his high school's Hall of Fame. Welcome, my good brother LaShawn, man. Welcome, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Hey, when I was reading this, man, I felt like I was doing an introduction of an all-star game when I'm reading the four-time Teacher of the Year and the 18-time Coach of the Year, man. Oh man, that's dope, man. That's dope. That's dope. Where did that come from, man? Your passion. It appears as if you have a passion of education, a passion of learning. Where did that come from?
Man, my passion for learning, I'm gonna be honest, I think the passion for learning really comes from the struggle of growing up in poverty.
Hmm.
You grow up not only in poverty, because I think that you don't really know you're in poverty until you possibly kind of get out of it. Um, but growing up just in a impoverished, marginalized, small community, man, it made me realize that there was only a few things that could really
Hmm.
um, take me out of that type of environment, so to speak. And so I knew there were two things. One thing that I had absolute control over, and it was what I took in the form of knowledge, how I applied myself. And so that, man, I just have always had that intrinsic motivation. It certainly comes from having a mom who didn't accept excuses. And so even in the midst of the struggle, she never accepted excuses. Academic excellence was always the expectation.
Oh.
And so just having that push, man, from a mom that didn't really play no games, and then
Hmm.
having a little
Hmm.
bit of intrinsic motivation that really kind of pushed me over the top, man.
No, that's amazing. Was some of that intrinsic motivation you from the South? Did that come by a switch too?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I like to say I was a good kid, but I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I had to learn some lessons the hard way for sure. So,
Hmm.
but again, that discipline, even though we only define discipline through like the lens of like, corporal punishment, but discipline,
Hmm.
man, is not just about that. Discipline is being taught to do what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, and how you're supposed to do it, right? So just that expectation, growing up in a very disciplined household where you didn't really have the choice to fail, it made me
Hmm.
into a more disciplined person. And
Hmm.
so everything that I do, I just want it to be the best at. And everything that I do, I just believe in putting my all into it, man. So
Yeah.
That's just how I'm wired.
Now, that's when I think about, you as being a principal, man, and I think about all the obstacles and things um, that are before kids and before our students. One of the conversations, is this school to prison pipeline. And when I was, looking and checking out, man, you have a great deal of experience when it comes to school to prison pipeline. How would you define school to prison pipeline?
So how I would define school to prison pipeline, and again, I'm hoping that a wide range of people will watch this podcast, and so I think
Hmm.
we intellectually can really call a lot of things. But if I could just simply put it, for lack of better terms, in layman's terms, it is this idea or this notion that some schools are designed in a way that expedites the likelihood of a child to
Hmm.
eventually end up in prison.
Hmm.
So the hard part to believe is that there's things that we do in schools that perpetuate the likelihood of a child ended up in prison through our disciplinary criteria, also through our restorative practices and how we discipline children.
What are some of the what would you say some of the key contributing factors are when we discuss school to prison pipeline?
So, based on the research and based on all the things that's out right now, a lot of the contributing factors that contribute to this school to prison pipeline, two major contributions are gender
Hmm.
and race. There's a lot of research out, a lot of national research out that kind of proposes this idea that when you look at school discipline, particularly in rural and urban communities, that there seems to be this cyclical pattern that young boys of color tend to be disciplined at higher rates and the higher likelihoods than any other subgroup within our
Hmm.
buildings.
I I saw a stat that said, and it was a couple years old. It said black students are 4 times likely to be suspended than their peers. I thought that was an amazing stat when all of us, if there's, I don't want to say crimes, but if there's disciplines that are broken, why is there a likelihood of their peers being disciplined or not being disciplined at such a rate?
That's a great question. Years and years ago, I'm not sure if you may have heard of this, but Yale University is called the Yale case study. Yale University did a case study on preschool students.
Hmm.
And what they did was they had several teachers who simply were wired with cameras. And it was about 100, if I'm not mistaken, it was about 130 kids, maybe 150, 130 to 150 preschoolers. And the outcomes of this study showed that teachers spent more time in preschool
Hmm.
watching watching kids of color more than any other subgroup. So what that kind of, you know, covertly means is that if I watch you longer, I'm going to
Right.
see more
I'm going
infractions.
to see you do something.
Right? I'm
Hmm.
going to see you do something, right?
Hmm.
And so because of that, the outcomes were that what was why was it so that the teachers were watching the kids of color more than the kids of who weren't kids of color? And
Hmm.
not only that, there was another piece that came out of it that said that the teachers of color tended to be a little bit more harsh on the kids of color than the other subgroups. And so we have this we have this dichotomy
Hmm.
that on one hand we look at the school to prison pipeline and we say that, oh, black boys are being misrepresented or being
Hmm.
targeted by people who are of non-African American descent. But
Hmm.
then we have this other story that for some reason internally you have black educators who tend to be harder on black students than other subgroups. So there's this dichotomy of like really deep introspection that can really like I think that really can that we could justify from a lot of different angles and we could confront that from a lot of different in a lot of different ways.
Hmm. And one of the things I thought as I was, kind of doing some reading, does the disciplinary system in schools contribute to the pipeline, especially regarding zero tolerance policies?
Great question. And so what seems to happen with the zero tolerance policies is zero tolerance policies are just basically like just black and white policies, right? If
Okay,
you do this, you will get this. There's no
gotcha.
tiered support, there's no tiered intervention. It's just simply black and white, right? So for
Hmm.
example, if you fight, you get this punishment. There's no
Hmm.
there could possibly be um no type of like intervention, no type of reconciliation, um, no type of like restoration or restorative practices. And so those black and white disciplinary policies tend to speed up punishment because
Hmm.
they don't have like levels of support or levels of tiered
Okay.
support. And so when you have policies that are not black and white and they're more tiered in terms of how to support each individual case, then now you tend to work more towards this idea of equity and not
Okay.
so much from this lens of like equality. So it's not like, oh, well, Keith did this. And so that means that if Leshaun does the same thing, he needs to get the same punishment. That
Right.
is true because I think all disciplinary policies are very, very black and white in some areas. But then there also has to be some flexibility
Right.
in a way in which like there is room for
Hmm.
there is some room for like restorative practices or there's room for some reconciliation from whatever the behavior was.
It seems like it's one of those things where when we talk about the black and white, like you said, if there's a fight, there's 2 3 days suspension. Um, but then if I know this student, where do I find or become more creative in the discipline? I remember, I'll share this with you. My son, I have a 15-year-old son, and I want to say he was in the 8th grade.
Mhm.
So he was playing with one of his best friends. Playing with one of my son honestly has never gotten in trouble in school. And sometimes I got questioned, like, is this my son? He's never gotten in trouble in school, in terms of his behavior. So 8th grade, right before he graduated, it had to be about 3 weeks before he graduated. He was playing with his good friend, kicked him in his private area while they were playing, and he got in trouble.
Hmm.
So his friend, they both said that they were playing, but he got suspended, in-house suspension for a day. Bragged to me later that they knew I was playing, but they had to suspend me because I kicked him. So I was in my head, I'm hoping, all right, dude, two things. Dude, you wait till you're about to graduate right before 8th grade and you get suspended. And you never got suspended. And then the other thing is, just listening to him um, go through school without any infractions, any disciplines. At the same time, I'm wondering, was it fair for him? Someone who the teachers know not to get in trouble, that may need more attention when in school in terms of education or his academics, but yet he doesn't. He follows all the rules and everything. I was wondering, is that fair? If that happened to another student, what would that look like?
So
You know.
it's you raise a pretty valid point because a lot of times we would tend to, and again that's why I think the school to prison exists, because as you're describing your son, good student, never gets in trouble, has his
Hmm.
first infraction and he gets in trouble, right?
Hmm.
But what's the other side? The other side is, what if the kid that he kicked or kicked him or whatever, what if he's troubled? What if he's always into stuff?
Hmm.
This always into stuff. So it's easy to say, you know what? To the bad student, let me give you this
Right.
punishment because you deserve it.
Right.
But
Right.
to the good student, let me give you a second chance. And see
Right.
that inequity in itself is what kind of creates that schism or that gap between like, I mean, you basically begin to create this subliminal culture in your building of like you have two disciplinary policies. How do we deal with the good kids and how do we deal with the bad kids? But in
Mhm.
reality, from my perspective, they're all good kids. And if you speak that language that one kid deserves a more harsh punishment than the other, that
Right.
speeds up the process and the likelihood that if the bad kid is constantly punished, then the bad kid is going to be one step closer to the suspension, which means one step closer to the likelihood of dropping out, which means one
Yeah.
step closer to having to do something that's probably not legal to have
Mhm.
a sustainable life, and probably one step closer to becoming that one out of three black males who ends up incarcerated. Why? Not because he was the bad kid, but
Right.
because the policies were more aggressive around who he was versus who he was not.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so we have to be
No, no,
mindful
no.
of that. Yeah, we have to be mindful of just like how we deal with all kids. And so it's like if I'm going to offer grace, it's got to be equitable. It can't
Right.
be just for the good kid or the kid who's
Right.
not doing what it's supposed to do. We have to be mindful of that in our policies, so that all kids are beneficiaries of what it is we're
Sure.
trying to teach or what it
Sure.
is we're trying to create.
Yeah, it's amazing that you said that when talking about being expelled or dropping out. You know, I saw a stat that I think it was when you drop out, um, there will be the youth will be arrested and charged within a year of the time they dropped out, and by
Mm-hmm.
the time they turn 25, it's stats said that they will be incarcerated up to three times. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was amazing how the domino effect happens. You know, just from a decision of inequity. Do you feel as if policies such as school resource officers and increased police presence in school impact the pipeline?
So I've seen the research, and I've
Okay.
seen the data around it, and I'm personally going to say no.
Okay.
Um, I'm going to say no because, and so I can see what. So the research kind of indicates that the presence of resource officers in places where there's been increased presence of resource officers, there tend to have been an increase in disciplinary infractions and
Hmm.
suspensions and expulsions amongst like boys of color. And so what I think is what I think the variable is, I think that when we look culturally at how we view law enforcement, I think that follows kids into schools. Where if we're not being if you're not being fed outside of school culturally, that this person is what they're called in nature. They are a
Hmm.
resource. Their
Absolutely.
job is to provide school safety. They're there to help you, not hurt you. But if I see that person not as my help, but if I see
Hmm.
that person as my antagonist, then
Hmm.
it's just a matter of time that my behavior is going to perpetuate some type of negative interaction between myself, that student, or that SRO. And so for me personally, no, I have SROs in my school, and to be honest, I'm happy that we have SROs in our school.
Hmm.
Um, just because I mean, again, you even if you have a strong control over what's happening on the inside of your building, like you don't have any control over your environmental safety in terms of the stuff that happens around your building. And so, I'll be honest, I think having an SRO in my building is another element of like
Okay.
psychological safety for kids and
Nice.
for adults,
Nice.
and it worked for us at my school and not so much against us. But I can't say that that's everybody's experience.
Sure. No, no, that's important. Feel like that's a good perspective, a different perspective to look at it. I know for me, you know, growing up, that was one of the things, like you said, it was one of the things that we taught that cops aren't a resource. You know, you got to watch out for them, be careful, they watching you, you know, always look in your mirror, they're right behind you, that they weren't a resource at all. So when you see them in school or anywhere, just driving by, you know, your defense mechanism um, comes up. So, you know, how do my one question is, what alternatives to traditional disciplinary measures exist that could help break the school to prison pipeline?
So I'm glad you asked that. So, I mean, I think the depending upon, first of all, creating alternatives to the school to prison pipeline is, I think it's so much power in the leader of the school,
Hmm.
how you see your kids, what message you want to convey. I mean, as a school leader, I mean, I will admit, like as you read in my bio, I'm a former coach, I'm a disciplinarian. Like my standard is high. I expect a lot from kids, and I apply a lot of pressure, right? But I'm not applying pressure because I'm trying to, I'm trying um, to identify myself as something. I'm applying pressure because in my building we understand that's how you get diamonds. And for me, some of those alternatives are, for example, like at my school we have check-ins, right? So of course, students who need that extra touch or who need that extra one-on-one guidance, or students who may not be on the best track in terms of academics or behavior,
Mhm.
like we have one-on-one check-ins where they have an assigned staff member that they check in with to give them that time, that create that psychological safety. And that is critical for boys because boys don't always communicate
Right.
effectively. I
Right.
think that's learned behavior. I think that's social conditioning. I think that's like social expectation. I think that's a
Mhm.
lot of things. And so I've learned that when you create that psychological safety for boys, boys then will find safety in that and will communicate on levels and deeper levels that they normally wouldn't. So now I know exactly what you need mentally, psychologically, and cognitively. Because if I don't know that, then you're going to speak that language through bad behavior. And so it's not always that boys are just bona fide bad. It's just that I don't know how to tell you that I'm hurting inside, I'm grieving inside, I'm
Yeah.
mad
Yeah.
because my
Yeah.
my my parent died, or I'm mad because my daddy never
Mhm.
showed up. It's not psychologically safe for boys to speak that language, but I can act it out and hope that you figure out that there's something going on inside of me. So when you create those safe spaces where boys feel comfortable to be able to communicate, to be able to effectively communicate, and to like unpack all of the baggage that they have to carry, and to not have to always like jump through all of these different hoops. If I'm if I'm not outspoken enough, they're gonna think I'm soft. If I'm too outspoken, too aggressive, they're gonna think I'm angry. If I'm not this, then that. If I'm not this, then that. Then boys, and then when I go home to my neighborhood, it's a whole nother
A
expectation
whole
of what
nother
me
expectation.
and what I'm supposed to do. And
Hmm.
so it becomes this cyclical cycle
Hmm.
of identity crisis of who do I have to be? And that often shows up as inconsistent negative behavior. And
Absolutely.
so as leaders, as instructional leaders and leaders of our school, we have to be able to identify that and create alternative mechanisms so that kids can feel safe and so that kids can feel that they can truly, authentically, and organically show up as them true selves every day and completely be able to really develop and manifest into whoever it is that they've been called to be. And so check-ins, I mean, in the morning there's 11 kids, there's 11 boys in my office for check-in, setting weekly
Nice.
goals, talking about daily expectations, talking about how we're going to reach the goal. So Friday, when we check in, when you come back on Friday, that we can go and evaluate how you've done. And we don't just have check-ins for boys. We have some of our young ladies who may have a
Hmm.
check-in with the
Nice.
AP, the dean of students, the counselor. So those are just alternative mechanisms. We also have a restorative facilitator. So like if you do something and if you're off, this is like brain science, but if my amygdala is off and I'm offline and I'm just all over the place, we understand that sometimes you just need a redirect, a behavior
Hmm.
redirect. We have someone who's skilled who can redirect the kid, and guess
Right.
what?
Right.
Once you
Right.
redirect it, we can get you back to class and now you can still be successful. But if you don't have those tiers of support, is once you mess up, you home, you're suspended, and now that becomes that cycle that contributes to the pipeline. And so as a leader, I do realize that there are times that I have to give kids punitive
Hmm.
punishments, right? But I also keep in mind that I do not want my school to be a space where 10 years from now kids end up in prison and they look back and realize that I got my criminal start in my middle school, right? And so yeah,
No, no. You hit an amazing point when you were talking about the just the protection when it comes psychological safety, and when it comes to communication with boys. I thought that was an amazing point. And some of my, when I talk to some clients, when I'm talking to guys, it's building that trust. it's
right,
it's, it's it is paramount to build trust with, especially boys. And when I was thinking about the lack of, not even a lack, but the not wanting to communicate because I don't trust you, the thought was, for me, it's I don't trust you right now. I don't want to say anything. And then we become men and we do the same thing,
Correct.
and in all sorts of our relationships, where there is no psychological safety. So now I thought that was a good point when it came to psychological safety and being there, just and for the young men to be able to feel safe, and now they can be open to their thoughts and open to their ideas of what needs to be said and how they feel, and truly be open to how they feel. um, my next question: what role does the lack of mental health resources and support services in school play in pushing students towards the criminal justice system?
Mm,
Do you feel like there's a role that is being played?
very much so.
Mhm,
I'm not sure if you've read Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson.
mhm,
But in that book, um, Brian Stevenson talks in I think it's chapter 8 about how most boys and men of color, um, when they go into prison, most are identified with some type of mental disorder. And when I say most, I know that's a broad statistic,
right,
but I'm
right.
just going to say over 50% to just to make sure I'm on track. But over half of the young boys and young men of color who end up in prison, they are diagnosed with a mental disorder. And see,
Mm,
here's the problem. The problem is we don't understand that there is a difference between trauma and a mental disorder,
mhm,
and ready for this, and a learning disability. 80% of all children who have a diagnosed learning disability in this country are young boys of color.
of color. Mhm,
So we have so what happens is if I'm a young boy color, I may show up like really angry because maybe no one knows that my father died last year, right? Because I don't
mhm,
communicate and I don't talk, right? So maybe my anger is because my father died, which is a form of trauma. But because I can't stay in class long enough and I'm failing my classes, guess what? Now I've got an IEP that says I
mhm,
can't learn. When my issue wasn't that I couldn't learn, my real issue was I had some trauma that I didn't know how to deal
right,
with, and nobody
right,
knew it was trauma. And so
right.
we misconstrue trauma and learning disabilities and mental health to a
Mental
point
health.
where we just drop labels on people. We drop
Mhm,
labels on kids, particularly boys, and we just leave it there, not even knowing that a lot of times it's misdiagnoses that happen a
mhm,
lot. And a
mhm,
lot of times we don't even truly understand cognitively what is going on. And so, on the flip side of that, if I am a kid who needs some mental health services and my school or my district is not willing to support that, then that also means that is it me that is totally responsible for my behavior, or is it the manifestation of my mental health that's
mm.
responsible
That's right,
for my
right,
behavior,
right,
right?
right.
And so, in the educational world, there's things called manifestation meetings where you have to decide, like, okay, was the kid responsible for this, or was it the kid's disorder, or was it the kid's like diagnosis? And when we don't have a strong grasp on that, then it spirals out of control. And you're wondering, like, wow, why would a kid do that at school, or why would a kid do this, or why would a kid do that? And so when we don't understand mental health and we don't understand brain science, then we make decisions based on what we see,
Mhm,
not based on what we understand. And so, listen, I when you have those deep relationships with your kids, I know when my kids are on and I know when they're off. All right, it
mm,
goes back to the example, right? When your brain is on, it's like this. When that amygdala is off, that amygdala's out, it's off, right?
mhm,
I know
mhm,
when my kids are off like this. So I know, like some of my kids, I'm like, you know what? He needs 10 minutes before we have this conversation about why he did that.
yep,
Because right
yep,
now he won't be able to process and have a conversation because he's off. You know
mhm,
what? Give you 10 minutes. I'm gonna check emails for 10 minutes, get that amygdala back on, maybe play some
mhm,
music. I might even, it's a lot of ways you can kind of reset a kid, but nevertheless, when that happens, once that kid is back on, it becomes magical how far you can go with a child. But if I
yeah,
don't understand mental health, if I don't understand brain science, then what I might do is I might end up kicking 20 kids out of school
mhm,
when
mhm,
all it was that they needed some more mental health care or support.
yeah, 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 I recall seeing it in many forms, whether it was on a football field, basketball court, whether it's in a classroom, where a teacher will come in when there's something going on. A teacher will come in, and instead of giving that student, giving that child that time that they need, they influence even more, for that child to become even more irate, even more upset, versus, and then is the calm down, don't tell me calm down right now. Don't tell me calm down. But it's that, and I feel like I wonder if more awareness, with staff, when it comes to the teachers, um, will really be monumental in the support of our students. But that also comes with trusting leadership as well as knowing that, all right, this is the model that we have set here, here at the school. So I think that's amazing. You spoke about the academic part. Can you speak on the over reliance of standardized testing? If you don't mind speaking on that.
Yeah, I can speak on the over reliance of standardized testing.
You laugh.
I'm laughing because it's almost like it's almost like um, it's almost like you were really kind of like reading my mind, because honestly, I think that the way we test and assess kids is pretty singular. Um,
Hmm.
and so there's only one way of determining, does a kid is a kid academically thriving or not. And I'm going to use this example. It's radical. I may get some pushback from this, but I'm okay with it because I'm validated in it. But for example,
So,
when we start designating kids as gifted, all right,
hmm.
academically gifted. Like many of us were designated as academically gifted. But I'll be honest, I was never in AIG, so I guess I wasn't gifted, right? So my point is, how do we determine giftedness? Like how do you I mean, not only like tangibly, but fundamentally. I know that in North Carolina in third grade, the kids take a COGAT test that measures a whole lot of things, right? And so it's from those results that we begin to label kids as like academically gifted. But see,
Hmm.
my thing is, if we truly believe in the fundamentalism of what we preach, meaning like that kids learn differently, your
Hmm.
giftedness may show up with a pad and a pencil in the form of art, and my
Right.
giftedness may show up in the form of like my words. I may be able
Hmm.
to academically articulate at a level that you can draw, and that somebody else may be able to sing. And so my thing is like giftedness comes in a lot of different forms, but because we don't allow that to take place, we automatically begin to put kids in buckets as early as third grade. You're the academically gifted kids. You're the middle of the pack kids. You're the bottom kids, right? Even if I'm an academically gifted kid in the bottom, you've already labeled me, and now I begin to see myself as as where you put me.
Hmm.
And so now you want me to produce on a standardized test, one test
Right.
a year,
Right.
one
Right.
real test a year that says that I'm either like proficient or I'm not. I
Mm.
just don't believe in the how we put so much weight in standardized testing. I also don't believe in how we use the standardized testing to determine the basically the life trajectory and outcome for kids. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
but in reality, though, we start building prisons sometimes off of the reading scores of young boys in third grade. So,
Mm.
are we trying to
Jeez.
measure academic giftedness, or are we trying to map out our privatized prison system, which will generate a whole lot of money, not for that kid and their families, but at the expense of that kid? And so,
Hmm.
that's a little deep, but it's real. And so, um, I just think that just the fact that we place everything on standardized tests, and I'm all about accountability. Trust me, I'm all
Right.
about
Right.
accountability.
Right.
But you got kids. How am I supposed to take pride in a school or community if I say, "Oh, your district's a failing district"? The schools are failing, right? Um, and so I tell my kids all the time, I don't care what letter hangs over our school. We don't have F students and we don't have F
Mm.
teachers, right?
Hmm.
And so your identity is not attached to your test score. If that's the measure of accountability, then guess what? We will. That's the game we'll play, right?
Right. Right.
We'll do our best. We'll strive for those fives, and we'll keep it moving. But at the end of the day, you are not a test score. Your life
I know
means
that's right.
so much more than that.
I
And
know
because
that's
if
right.
that's the case, I wouldn't be sitting on this podcast with all the things you said. I would have been written off a long time ago if
Right.
we
Hmm.
were the schools and the communities that we grew up in.
Hmm. Now that's a word right there. Um, are there any successful examples of programs or initiatives that have effectively reduced the impact of school to prison pipeline?
Well, and again, and the reason why I keep saying research is because the school to prison pipeline, it can
Is
generate
research.
all kinds of opinions, but there
Right.
is research out there that's proven. And some of that research is, again, the whole issue around school to prison pipeline, at least the information that's out, is trying to draw this connection between um, high behavioral and school infractions
Hmm.
and how it impacts boys of color. And so there is research out there that says that, like, sometimes things that can reduce it are with our students having more teachers of color, having to experience that. The last research I read was kids who have teachers who are taught by teachers who look like them culturally, that increases like the likelihood of like connectivity. They connect on different levels, and those
Hmm.
kids tend to do 29% better than kids who sometimes are in classrooms where they can't relate to the person that's teaching them. Now, let me just say this, because I know that by the time your podcast is aired all throughout the country, let me just say this: I am not saying that the only person that you can learn from is a person that shares your race or your ethnicity. That's not
Right.
what I'm
Right.
saying. All
Right.
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 Because again,
Right.
I had a whole lot of teachers that were not my race and ethnicity and may had a
Hmm.
huge impact on my academia experience. But what I am saying, for some kids, that psychological safety, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes for some kids, they feel more safe in those environments, which means if I feel safe, I'm willing to kind of unpack my garments a little bit. I'll take my jacket off. I'll stay a while. I'll get comfortable. And it's in that comfort that I can learn more effectively and I can almost fail forward unapologetically. I'm not afraid to make mistakes because I feel so comfortable in the learning setting that I'm in.
Couple more questions. Couple more questions. Do you feel as if communities and parents can be involved in advocating for change to prevent this school to prison pipeline? And if so, how?
I think parent engagement is one of the things that the entire country, um, for the most part, are looking for ways to increase. You can never
Hmm.
you can never have too much parent engagement. And
Hmm.
so one of the reasons that school has to have disciplinary policies, can we be honest, Keith? One of the
Yes,
reasons
sir.
why we have disciplinary policies is I didn't go to college to, I started out as a teacher. I didn't go to college because I wanted to spend all day disciplining kids. I went to college to teach because I wanted to teach, right?
Hmm.
So education has become so much that before I can get my lesson done, I got to be the mom,
Hmm.
I got to be the
Yeah,
dad, I might
yeah,
got to be
yeah, yeah,
your psychologist, I might got to be your counselor,
yeah,
I
yeah,
might got to be a whole lot of things. And
yeah.
so the whole point of like parent engagement, I believe, is that when we get parents like truly on board, so how great would that be to say, listen, you know what, ma'am, Joe is off today. I don't know what's going on. Is there
Hmm.
anything that happened before he came to school? If so, can you talk to Joe? If Joe gets on that phone and talks to a mother or a father who he loves and respects, that's power, right? Like for me, I didn't need to hear my mom's voice. All you had to do was mention her name, and my whole disposition shifted. All you had to do I need to call? By the time you got call out, I'm good,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So,
No, you don't need to call.
right. So, but because of the disconnect between parent
Hmm.
engagement, because of the disconnect between student to parent engagement and teacher to staff engagement, I'm going to be honest. I believe that we are seeing one of the most neglected generation of kids that we've ever
Yes.
seen. Our kids spend less time with their parents than any other generation of
Yeah,
kids. And
yeah,
so when you say, like I just gave you example, you're gonna call my who? Oh, I'm good. I'm a
yeah. It
type.
don't mean nothing.
But now, do I need to call your parent? Okay, call her.
Go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, the truth. Call her. She's not gonna answer. Call her. She don't care. Call her. She doesn't. I mean, so that piece right there in itself, you say, how can it impact the prisoner pipeline? Well, guess what? If there's a that's a tier of support. If discipline happens at the house, then guess what? Then I don't have to discipline you so much at school. And if I don't have to discipline you so much at school, then you
I
can
could
learn
teach.
and you can make it
Hmm.
out of school and you bypass the prison on your way to
Hmm.
military, college, sole proprietorship, entrepreneurship, and you go and live your
Hmm.
best life. But
Right.
if there's no discipline prior to the school system, and all of your lessons have to be taught the hard way from the school, all of your lessons have to be taught the hard way in society, then what's going to happen is your journey, your destiny to greatness is going to detour straight
Hmm.
to the jailhouse. And
Yes.
so that's so how parents can help with the prisoner pipeline system is be present and be engaged and work with us and not against us, right? Like not like your child is not the victim, your child is the victor. We love your kid, but it's
Right.
our
Right.
job to educate and to make sure that they're prepared for life,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. No. No. I think that's important. Like you just mentioned it. Like if discipline is going on there, I could teach. I don't have to tell you to, stop, put the phone away or stop doing certain things. I got a lot more time to teach and to give even more one-on-one because I'm not one-on-one academically versus one-on-one when I'm redirecting. I think that's important, man. Two things. Is there anything, any principles as a principal, is there any traits, characteristics that you've taken from some of your principles while you were in school, some of your leadership? And if so, what are
I got to be honest. I just got to be honest. Um, I never had a relationship with any of my principals.
they? Gotcha. Gotcha.
Never. I mean, the only time I saw my principals were like maybe in passing at an assembly, or if it was like if I was in trouble, and I didn't get in trouble a lot
Right.
because
Right.
so I didn't have a relationship. So I don't know what it feels. So the experience that my kids get, I don't know what it's like to sit in my principal's office, not because I've done something bad, but because my principal's just checking in on me to make sure that like
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so all of my qualities as a leader, I've acquired through just from the way I was raised. So that
Hmm.
discipline, that high expectation that my mom always set for me, like that drives me like every day. Being a coach, I'm gonna be honest. I won't just out there coaching. We want to win championships. Being a
Yeah.
coach,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
driven to win and to see kids succeed. Um, and also not only that, man, but like just being a believer
Yeah.
and just having the faith to know that like I'm not buried here. I've been planted here, and there's
Mm.
life trajectories that's going to be different simply because I was their principal. And so
Right.
when you mix all of those elements together and realize that you've been called to change life outcomes and not to
Hmm.
perpetuate them through a pipeline to prison system, like that almost like gives you this power. You know what I'm saying? This power to know that
Yeah.
the work
Sure.
can be
Sure.
done. And I'm not saying that we do it perfectly, and I'm certainly not saying that like that I'm the model to go by. But I know one thing: I know that trajectories are different because of the
Absolutely.
approach that I take.
So, Sean, one last question, man. If it's something that you want to leave for educators, as a leader, is there something that you like to say? One thing that you like to leave, for educators, whether it's school to prison pipeline, whether it's an approach to, students, what is it? Something that you like to leave?
So, and I have a student in mind when I say this, but I'm gonna say to educators, a lot of times we just see the children's behavior and we don't know the why behind the behavior. And sometimes kids experience so much horrific trauma that we are too busy wanting to see a punishment than
Hmm.
to see the promise
Hmm.
manifest.
Hmm.
So it's like, oh, Joe, you spoke out of turn. You go to I said, we are so hungry to see punishment. And I think that's even like a learned behavior that there's something in us that like to see people hurt.
Right.
But I'm not saying that that's the case with all teachers, but in all educators. But I've been in places and I know places where it's almost like, wow, y'all like just you like punishing kids. And I believe
Hmm.
in accountability, but I'm just saying that like there's so much that kids live through and go through that, like, if we slow down and not always be anxious about just issuing a severe punishment, not a consequence, because I say it every day at my school, every action, good or bad, has consequences.
Right.
Make
Right.
wise decisions. So life
Right.
is never going to exempt you from consequences, but we don't always have to punitively punish kids because of their actions. A lot of times kids become what they see in us. And
Right.
so they're
Right.
nothing but mere reflections of what they see at
Hmm.
home, in their community, the things that enter their think gates, the things that they see through social media. And so I just want to say to educators that you're in a unique situation and a unique position to alter trajectories. 10 years from now, that kid that was in your class, that headline might read, or that narrative. I just said it to a kid this morning. There's gonna be two narratives. People are gonna say, "Wow, that kid was a busybody, but man, he went on and became something great."
Right. Right.
Or that narrative could read, "That kid was brilliant. How in the world did he end up serving life in prison?"
Mm-hmm.
And we have the power to stand in the gap to make sure that that second narrative doesn't
Hmm.
manifest, that first one does. And that
Right.
is, we've got to make sure that we offer tiered support, that we're able to support kids to the best of our ability while also simultaneously teaching them life lessons and teaching them grace and mercy, because one, we all need it, and two, if someone didn't give us that same grace, then neither one of us would be sitting here. And so don't forget how you used to act in sixth grade, or how you used
Right.
to act.
Right.
I tell
Right.
teachers, don't forget now. Don't act like you always been who you've been today. That's not the case. So just have a flashback every now and then and realize how
Yes.
much how much of a handful you were to someone else. But because they didn't quit on you, you able to stay the course and you were able to become who you're supposed to come. So teachers, educators, leaders, you guys are
Yeah.
superheroes. You have power that other people don't have in your building. Make sure you're creating systems that bring out the best in kids,
Hmm.
and not systems that break kids and push them closer to the jailhouse and to the prison.
Mm. Leshaun Jenkins, man, I appreciate you. An example of walking in purpose, you are, man. I thank you for for joining me on Just Our Thoughts with the podcast. And this is Keith and my good brother, man, good friend now, man. Leshaun Jenkins, thank you, Principal. Thanks again, man. And
Thank you, man. It's an honor. My pleasure.
yeah, thanks, man. And appreciate you, man. We'll stay in contact
Mhm.
for sure, man. So we in a group together, and definitely looking forward to talking to you a little more, man. All
Yes, sir.
right,
Thank you so much.
Uh,
Appreciate you.
all right. Thank you, man.
You're welcome.